It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design.
All right, we're back again. Today we're going to talk about stuff. But before we do, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Peter Lawrence.
I'm Ben Story.
And I'm Chad Levine.
And I'm Kyle Bacher, and today we're going to talk about the AWS Well-Architected, would you call it program?
I would call it a program.
Yeah.
For us, it's a service offering now that we are certified to provide to our customers.
So I'll just start with what is it? It's a service, but what does it do? What do we do with it?
You want me to go, or do you want to go, Ben?
Describe.
I'll let Chad. So, kind of the way that just to frame it up for our listeners. So, Chad kind of has the technical side of the Well-Architected, being one of our senior solution leads for our program. And I kind of got the business side of it. So we'll kind of hit it from a couple different angles today. So kind of, why don't you go ahead, Chad, from the technical side and let all the listeners know what we're dealing with.
Sure. Yeah. So technically, Well-Architected is a framework that we use for to help customers kind of identify blind spots in their AWS workloads, as far as things they might have missed in specific areas of what are called the well-architected pillars. So that's stuff like operational excellence, security, cost optimization, reliability, things like that. So it's a framework that we walk through with a customer to help them identify best practices that they, may or may not be implementing. From a partner perspective, it's a program that we're part of. We are a well-architected partner, which means we're a partner that can provide this service to our customers, if that makes sense.
Because we've been trained on it. And
right, correct.
Yes.
Yep. So as part of that program, we have to have at least two technical leads, I guess they're called, probably, right, Ben?
Yep. And you can only do a well-architected review if you're a professional level certification too. So the standards of this program are very high. So you're getting very good quality consultants when we're coming through the door to do this review with you. And and Chad alluded to, it's a partner program. It's not something that you can do yourself. There's very specific tools that AWS provides to us that we walk through with you to try to help give you more visibility and recognition into your environment. To hopefully the end result is to reduce risks, to make sure you're kind of following best practices and things like that.
so, Ben, you said there's a business involvement to this too?
Yeah, because there's a checklist and very specific things that we need to do, and Chad can kind of jump into it and talk about this a little bit more because he's done a couple now. But there's things that we're looking at on the technical side and seeing how environments are set up. But there's also some questions that we need to ask key stakeholders as well as we're going through these reviews to kind of cross-reference business and technical.
So Chad, as you've gone through that framework, it's structured, but you with your experience, you're probably going to find that you're going to catch things and see things that might not be part of that framework. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't even, maybe it's not that they're not part of the framework, but it's not always completely clear lines, right? That are black and white. So really, there's a well-architected framework tool that kind of, it's relatively new. So that helps you go through this process. It kind of expedites the process. And really what it is a series of questions that are categorized by those 6 pillars that I mentioned, like security and cost optimization, things like that, that you walk through with the customer. Some of them are kind of more business and process oriented, and then a bunch of them are technical. And so you just kind of find the key stakeholders in those areas with the customer and then walk through those questions with them. But a lot of times it's not just a yes or no, do you do this? And so the tool and the framework allows you to kind of put notes in there and things like that too, because a lot of times it'll be like, maybe the question is, for operational excellence, are you using infrastructure and code as code? Well, a lot of times the answer is in some places. And so then you'll put notes in there, because the idea is this isn't just like something you walk through and you do it and then you're done. It's more like you'll revisit it maybe once a year because you get a report at the end of it. That's kind of the output of, here's how you scored in these various areas, and here's some ideas on things you could maybe work on. And you'll probably revisit it in the future and see, now are we at a place where we can, tackle some of these higher priority items, things like that. Because what it does is identify risks that are categorized as, like high level or medium or whatever. And so, like I said, a lot of times it'll be, the answer isn't just yes or no. It's we're doing this in this area, but we haven't addressed it yet over here because of reasons, right? Because it's business, right? And so there's various reasons why you may or may not have done what's considered best practice, and you can't right now, but maybe you can later. And so you need kind of that flexibility in the framework a little bit. It's not just a checklist of yes or no. It's more of a process. So
I can see like doing this,
right?
Yeah, I
think that
always
kind
changes.
Of be a good goal.
And two things to think about as well as you may have more than one AWS environment within your organization, and your outcomes can be different for each AWS environment that you have. So, you may not want to run it on one, but you may want to have kind of that yearly review process on multiple environments to make sure that things aren't changing so much as you're developing and pushing new products and code to your different environments and stages that you're falling out of kind of compliance or best practices. And say, what do you think, Chad?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of these larger customers will have many, many AWS accounts, right? And it's you're doing this well-architected review on a workload. That's what you're doing, right? And so you guys know, like the bigger customers have many, many workloads running, right? And so, and they're all at various stages of moving to the cloud and things like that. And so some have probably, maybe done a better job than others and things like that. And they're all just in a different stage probably because, across a big organization, it's completely different teams that are owning these different workloads. So, we might do many well-architected reviews for one customer.
And this wouldn't be like I have to be in the cloud in order to start this process, right? I can't do it from this won't give me my recipe for getting into the cloud, will it?
Yeah, that's not, there's a whole different framework for that called the Cloud Adoption Framework that AWS has. So that's maybe a different podcast, but but that might be some of the notes that you take as you're doing this is, maybe you're in the middle of a migration from on-prem to the cloud. So you've got kind of this hybrid thing going on, or maybe hybrid's what you're doing. And that would be part of the notes, right? Well, in some of these areas, we're not quite where we want to be yet because we want to move to the cloud and we haven't, or we don't have the capability to do infrastructure and as code with our on-prem workloads or whatever it is, right? Like every customer is different, but that's the whole idea of it, is to just help you find, are there areas you missed? It's kind of nice to have that list that's categorized to kind of make sure that you didn't forget about anything, right? Especially a lot of customers kind of have concerns if they're brand new to the cloud. Specifically, what I notice is in the areas of like security and cost. They're the security part's new to them in the cloud as opposed to on-prem. And everybody's heard these nightmare stories of a workload that got spun up and ran up a huge bill. And they want to make sure that they've got guardrails somewhere to make sure they're not going to do that, and that they're, buying savings plans where they should be and things like that. So it's pretty helpful for that. Yeah, that's a real thing, right? That happens.
So you talked about sorry, Ben, you talked about the workload, kind of focusing on each one. Is there like a starting point? Because you can spin up AWS and, do really small things with it to very large applications and workloads, like you were saying. Is there like a point at which you should do it? Like, is there a starting point? Okay, we built this application, so now we're going to do a well-architected on that application. Or we have this environment we're using to spin up virtual machines. So what level should they start thinking about this in their process of adopting AWS?
Yeah, good question. So I guess I would typically recommend it if you've got a workload that hit production. Because that's kind of what you want to. In fact, it's broken out by production versus pre-production in the tool. And I believe, there's requirements around, you have to do a certain number of production workload reviews and things like this. So I think that's a good time to do it. I have a customer right now that we've just kind of hit production not that long ago, and we're going to do their review real soon here. I think that's a good time to do it to make sure, like I said, you don't have any blind spots that, all of a sudden you got a security hole or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be exciting to get back, like you've gotten to production and you want to make sure that, you've gotten there and with all the right things in place and
right. Yeah, I mean,
something.
ideally, maybe you do it before, right? So that before you even hit production, you've done it. But if you've got a workload that's in production, you probably want to do it to make sure that you went down the list and made sure you did everything.
And it is also pretty flexible framework. So a customer could just say, hey, let's just focus on cost optimization for this particular review. And we could just use one lens out of 6 or 2 lenses out of the 6 that are available to do the reviews. So we can kind of be, give them a full report if they want to look at all 6, or if they're just really concerned about security and cost optimization, we could just do that one, or those 2, I guess, and provide a report for that. And I think it's really kind of a nice outcome at the end, because it gives them really good visibility into maybe some high risk things that are going on in their environment that we maybe want to remediate at some point, but also could give them a nice roadmap to maybe some things that they want to take care of in the future that are lower risk, that don't maybe need to be fixed right away.
So how are oh, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
So this sounds really awesome. I'm just, the way you guys are talking about it, like we're talking like a month or 6 weeks to get this done. Chad, how long is this kind of thing going to take?
Yeah, good question. I mean, end to end, I think AWS says it takes 2 to 4 hours. It's probably a little more than that. I would say 4 at a minimum, but that's usually stretched out in my experience over several days, because you got to kind of get on people's calendar to walk through these questions with them and things like that. But you can probably get it knocked out in a total of 4 hours or so. The tool helps a lot because it's got really the questions listed there, and you can check them. And it's like Ben said, it's got a ton of flexibility too, because you guys know every app is different, every workload is different. So there's sometimes when maybe questions don't apply, and you can just mark that as don't apply, and then it this doesn't apply to this workload, and therefore it doesn't go on their score as a negative thing that they maybe want to look at, right? And there's really no mandates in there. It's really just a temperature check in these various areas to say like, hey, how are we doing in these areas? What are some maybe higher risk things that we might want to look at? And then you just it's a kind of an ongoing thing for the life of the workload that you probably revisit, like Kyle said, once a year would be awesome.
I had like 2-week assessment in my brain. So 4 hours it's nothing. I mean, it seems like
start to finish, with breaks in between and things like that. If we didn't have it done in a week, I'd be surprised. And that's reaching out to people. Hey, can I get on your calendar for an hour? Yeah. And then you might have a follow-up of another hour. We didn't get through everything. And it's usually not just one person. There's usually like kind of a technical owner and a business type person that you would want to talk to about more of the process related things. But yeah, it's not terrible.
So if I'm like on the technical side, how afraid should I be when you come in and point out all of my flaws and everything I did wrong?
That's funny. That's a valid concern, right? So it's not supposed to be that. It's not supposed to be, hey, I'm going to poke holes everywhere I can. It's not like that at all. It's really, let's talk about your app. And I mean, we've all been doing this for a while. So we know that like, if there's something that looks weird, it's probably there for a really good reason. It's not just because somebody wanted to do something, incorrectly or whatever. It's more like, hey, there was this situation where there was, some business constraint or whatever. We're well aware of that. It's not like here's a bunch of knocks on your app. It's more, hey, here's some ideas. Maybe we didn't think of these when we were going through, and we can put it on the list of things to revisit. So it's not meant to like get the architect in trouble with his boss or something like that.
I mean, time constraints are obviously usually the biggest problem, right? Like I need it done in 4 weeks, and it doesn't matter. I don't care if you don't have time to learn infrastructure as code. You still need to get it done, right?
Right. Or we've all written that code that has to bend over backwards because of some legacy system, the way it was designed, the way it's storing data, whatever, right? And the first time when you walk in somewhere and you see this chunk of code, you're going, whoa, how did we arrive here? Like we've all seen that. So yeah, there's no There's no finger pointing, right? It's just, hey, let's look at this and think about how we could maybe address some of this in the future.
Well, it's like a refinement.
Right.
You're just continually refining. So it's going to get better and better. And that's what you want. At the end of the day, it's like, yeah, if I built something and you can like show us how we can lock this down better, how we can save money, things we can add, things we should change because a new feature came out, why we used the wrong database type. Yeah. So,
well, that's the thing. It's at that level, Kyle. I should mention that it's not at the, like, I'm analyzing how you did your app architecture, code wise necessarily. It's more at that higher level of what services did you use? What are some security things that we should have looked at that, did we or did we not? Where can we optimize cost? It's more kind of at that, enterprise architecture and infrastructure level. Right. Are you using serverless where you could, things like that.
Right. Where it makes sense, right? Like,
right.
Serverless for small tasks is amazing and does a great job, but it's not for everything and it's not for nothing. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Probably not if it needs to be on all the time. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Things like that.
I can't even imagine what that would be like. Got my Lambda that just runs.
So how quickly after this review do they get their report? Does it happen like pretty quickly? It's being generated as you go. I'm not familiar with the tool, but how quickly can they like get actionable information that they can do something with to make their environment better?
Yeah, right away. So, because the tool is within their AWS account. So you literally, when you start it, you push a button to say, I'm going to do a new workload. And then you walk through the questions for that workload, right? You give it a name and stuff like that. And then you generate the report right in there. So if they have access to the well-architected tool in their own AWS account, they can just print the report. Or you can send it to them. You can do it.
Typically, we have a little bit of a review process with them because, I don't know, Chad, probably haven't done a well-architected where you haven't found a high-risk flag that we probably want to discuss with the client right away. At least make them aware of those high-risk ones. And then, they can decide, if they want us to help remediate those or if they want to remediate them themselves. Then there is partner funding. That's one part of the program that we could help our clients out with to offset some of the costs of us helping them remediate the issues. Is not everybody might be eligible, but I think most customers and clients would be eligible for us to help remediate those high risk issues based on our consulting.
So they know like what issues are standing out. Will they know what it will take to get there to remediate those issues, like estimates or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that's once we get like the report, it would be like a Chad looking at it and giving an estimate of the security thing is a 2-hour, estimate, and, going through those high risk and kind of creating, some sort of estimate back to the customer on what it would cost to, and then they can choose whether they want to fix them or not.
Yeah, and if they have tech people, they can decide if it's something they want to try to tackle, or they get at least an idea of what it's going to take internally. Right. And then do you prioritize, the things you find? Like you really need to fix this like now versus, think about this over the next year. You might want to do this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's kind of a combination of things, I would say. Some of the prioritization is done for you automatically because things are marked as high risk or not as high risk, right? So that's a little bit of priority right there. And then some of it depends on the customer, what's the most important to them. Like I said, typically I see security and cost being pretty important, but also reliability and things are also pretty important. But we'll kind of work with them. And then they, like Ben said, if we give them estimates, a lot of times it will be high risk in combination with how how easy is it to fix? How fast, right? Because a good example would be you don't have MFA on your root account. That's a pretty obvious security problem that's very easy to fix, right? I can fix it right now super fast, as opposed to you guys aren't using infrastructure as code and your app is huge. That one's going to take a little longer, right. And it will help your operations quite a bit. But they may decide, well, we don't really have the money right now to implement that. And, there's a lot of business factors that play in a lot of times, right? Where from a business perspective, they want features maybe. And they
right.
Even though it would be super awesome to have all your infrastructure totally repeatable, it's a little harder to sell sometimes, right? So it's a lot of that. It's a conversation with the customer about here's the things, here's about what we think they would take, and they might have questions about where they want specific estimates on ones that they're interested in, and then they'll decide whether they want to do it or not. Or like you said, they maybe have people that can do it themselves, right?
And this isn't just a money grab, right? We're not out there just trying to whip up some services or anything like that. This is to help the customer and help them save money on their account, right?
You gotta get that true code. You gotta get that true code and the
Well, no, it is 100% for the customer, because again, we have funds that we can apply for to help offset all the costs of the customer doing a well-architected review and remediating any of the issues that we find in the report. So it's a real low risk opportunity for them to get a high value output of this report.
Yeah, I would think the majority of the time, the cost savings we find in doing this would pay for the 4 hours we spent creating the report, walking through the questions and generating the report, right?
Right.
There's a lot of times low-hanging fruit in my experience on the cost side. I mean, if they're not using a savings plan for their compute, for example, that can be a 70% savings on all their compute costs.
That seems like a nice find.
It's
right?
huge, right? It's huge. Yeah. And there's, all kinds of things like that a lot of times are pretty straightforward to implement, right? You just purchase the savings plan 3 years up front and instant savings on your bottom line.
Well, then as you go through this stuff, you're like educating the customer, the services, features, like things they didn't know about that they could have done starting out. There's a lot, as if they did this frequently or through all their different workloads, it's really going to be valuable information for them just to know kind of what to focus on, and maybe some learning opportunities internally and things like that on because it's so big. The platform is dauntingly huge.
For sure. I think that's one of the biggest value adds is their people probably don't have the time to sit and research, well, what are the best services I should use for solving this problem, right? So it's kind of nice to have a partner that has people that had to learn that stuff, right? They kind of have to know what's in the box. Because like you said, that drop-down list of services, when you go into AWS, it's huge, right? So I think that'll at least give them a little comfort to know that you looked at it through that lens, kind of knowing what's in the box. Hey, are we using the right services that are, the most cost effective? Are we right sized? Things like that. I think that's a lot of value probably for the customer.
Not everybody needs the biggest EC2 instance to run their accounting package on or whatever, right?
Correct.
Kyle, you're very quiet.
Oh, I didn't realize it was my turn to fill the gap. So we talked about a few of those benefits to customers, where like the thing that stands out to me is that we can find dollars for the remediation stuff. I mean, that's it's possible that this would cost them next to nothing. Is that correct, or is there like a percentage?
I mean, that's kind of the goal, is to really help reduce the cost of this, and that's why AWS has the program in place where they can help fund these types of projects for us, because AWS sees a ton of value in us doing these for them too. That's why they created this program, because all the customers they've seen do these well-architected have had better outcomes with their environments year over year.
I just like to point out that Ben, despite wearing the AWS hat, does work for Solution Design Group.
This is my cool hat that I got at reInvent last year. So I like to. It's now winter in Minnesota, so gotta stay warm. So support.
Do they have socks? That's really the big thing. I know you're big into socks.
I think they might have had some socks at some of the vendor booths last year. I mean, there's so many trinkets. Like you could come home with a whole suitcase full of just garbage.
Whoa! Not garbage.
Swag.
Trinkets.
Swag.
Yeah, exactly. So the starting point for you guys to even do the well-architected, like you had to be have that professional certification, right?
Yep. So you have to have the certification, and then there's a couple trainings you have to go through for it, just from the technical perspective. And then there's also some requirements that I think, like on the business side, like our managing directors had to go through and stuff. Ben probably knows more about that. I just know what I had to do.
Yeah, our whole sales team had to go through the well-architected training. So when our customers ask about it, they're informed on how to talk about it. We have a key stakeholder, which is our managing director. So he took the training. Myself as the partner manager, I took the training. So I understood where all the funding and everything needs to come from to make sure the customer gets what they need on their end. And then we had two of our senior solution leads, solution architects, take the training that have their professional certification. So it is not something that any consultant can do. It is a hard requirement that you have to have a professional level or specialty type certification to go through the well-architected training to learn how to implement the program and everything.
And I remember going through the solution architect training, and a lot of that training is looking for the most cost-effective solutions, right? They're not just like, hey, tell us that this will work, or if I drive a semi full of hard drives to your business, you can back up 1 gig of data and send it back into AWS, for $1 million. But they were really looking to say, what is the best cost-effective? What is the quickest? What is the right solution, the AWS environment. And I'm sure you use that every day, Chad, for this well-architected to try to help customers get their costs down.
Yeah, for sure. For like well-architected and just customer work, right? It's super helpful to go through those trainings to, like I said, you kind of know what's in the box then, and you kind of have an idea of, well, let's talk about what problem you're trying to solve. And then I have kind of this toolkit full of things where I apply the solution based on the problem, right? And that for me, like that certification was very helpful in that regard to just kind of understand, okay, now I feel like I have a good understanding of the breadth of all the things that are available to me here, at least all the major ones, right? There's some kind of specialized services that maybe aren't covered there, but not many, right? Like it's almost all of them.
Not as many as you'd like.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's over 200 services they offer, right? And so that exam alone is pretty big, the breadth of what it covers. So I think that's, like I said, pretty big value to the customer to not have to have all that knowledge with their resources. You can kind of, as a partner, come in and help them validate their solution and maybe guide it along in areas where they could use a little work, right?
Yeah. Are you also like telling them things they did right?
Yes.
Like that are already well-architected?
Not all doom and gloom.
No, I kind of try to make a big point of that. Like, hey, we're doing a very good job here, and here. Here's something we could think about. That's more of the delivery, I think, is we're doing awesome in these areas. Here's some places that could use a little attention. And we all understand how you get there, right? It's like I said, it's not, oh, this is terrible.
Right. Well, I always, whatever I built, I always just suffered trying to figure out what is the absolute best way to do this. And at some point, you just have to you have to move forward.
You got to finish.
Yeah. So it would have been really cool to have somebody kind of walk through afterwards and go, hey, you were close. Did you think about this? Or, this was a possibility. if things are, it's up and running and things are working great, are there still kind of areas that stand out?
Yeah, I would think so. We're not really looking at functionally if it's working or not, right? We're looking more at, are there ports open that shouldn't be? Are there security problems that, that are obvious ones that can be missed easily? Or are there cost savings that we definitely should do? Or are we not scaling up and down like we could? That's another way to optimize cost, right? Just things like that. Or, from like operations perspective, what do we have in place for DR? Like a lot of times that's something that maybe gets forgotten when timeline's tight and things like that. But if it's a mission critical system that can't go down, well, we probably should have a DR strategy, and we should probably game day it so that the first time we're doing it isn't when we have to get it right.
So
for
the listeners that don't know what DR is, what is DR?
Disaster recovery.
There you go.
So, if an entire AWS region goes down where our stuff is running, hopefully we have a strategy to fail over to a different region.
I was thinking that you were going to ask like what the verb game daying meant. So when you game day something, what is that? What is that, Chad?
Yeah, you just do like a practice run of it.
Okay.
To verify that it works, because a lot of times if you're exercising your disaster recovery and it's because you need to, because there's really a disaster, that's a stressful situation, right? So it'd be ideal if it wasn't the first time you were doing it.
Yeah, that's a certainty.
And the other, I think, nice thing about Well-Architected is, we've been running into some clients that have done some of these before, and we can go deeper, right? We can do a full blown just assessment, and we can really dive deep, assess your code, assess your architecture, and do all those things at that level, because our customers find different value in doing different types of assessments. And we can do a well-architected plus a deep dive assessment for you all in one big bang, maybe through a 2-week period versus just like a 4 to 8 hour period. And then you get like the ultimate report to align your goals, define visions, and really get some really good strategy what your AWS environment or cloud strategy might be at the end of something, an outcome like that. So it just definitely doesn't stop at well-architected review. They're definitely a really good thing, and I still feel like they provide a lot of high value. But you don't have to just do that, remediate, and be done. There might be other gaps that
just gonna plug the holes and go away. Yeah. It'll be fine.
Right. Well, each service, like I can see that there be value in a deep dive. Do we choose the right type of database? Is a structured correct? Like you could really go through and add a lot of value that way, in addition to the well-architected.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I actually did one of those fairly recently for a customer, where it was like a full assessment of kind of one main product and a couple other ones, where it wasn't just review their architecture, but it was also, hey, we don't have good pictures of our architecture. And so can you kind of tell us what we have and where we could maybe fix it? And then I made a whole list of recommendations, and that was a bigger effort, right? Like I think we put 100 hours in on that one. But they walked away with like 4 or 5 new diagrams and that kind of outlined everything they had deployed both on-prem and in AWS, how they talked, and then a list of prioritized things that seemed probably pretty important, because they were very concerned about being able to scale up as they brought on new customers that they're planning to do over the next year, that they wouldn't be able to scale. And we found, that you probably will not. And here's how you can get there. Found security issues for them, all that kind of stuff. And they found a ton of value in it.
Yeah, because you can get, where you can't see the forest through the trees, different teams working on different things, different services, being able to step back and look at that whole picture and in detail, has got to be like super helpful.
And
Right. Well, and I was able to
documented.
go to their technical people and ask them, hey, here's what I think you have. Does this look accurate to you? And then we kind of walked through, yep, this looks pretty good, and change this. And then we got those things where they were. And then I was able to say, hey, what else is like a thorn in your side that you would like to know more about or have me dig into? And there were a couple very specific things that they were like, can you draw a picture of this? I have no idea how it works. So I had to go figure out how does this work, and then how can we improve it and things like that. So some of those deeper dive assessments, I think, can add a ton of value. And so I think it was, like I said, we spent 100 hours on it. Well, I mean, in the first 2 days, we found them enough cost savings to save way more than that. Like immediately, so a ton of value there, I think.
And is that just a product of changing staff and things like that and not documenting things, or just a product of kind of not documenting as you go necessarily and getting to a point where it's a little bit more confused and so sort of knew that, but then they forgot all about it? And
well, as far as the cost savings go, like how did that happen?
or just that they needed documentation and diagramming and things like that. Like,
yeah, well, I think it's probably pretty typical, at least I've seen it a lot, is people are just super busy, right? And they just build stuff and they're on the hook for delivering functionality. And
Sure.
so then this documentation, at least at a high, I mean, they had documentation all over the place in like their wiki and stuff like that.
Yep.
But it gets stale and things like that. And some of those things just get missed, right? Because people are busy building out an architecture and they don't draw a picture of it a lot of times.
Well,
And
sometimes
that's
it's
just
a one-time thing, right? Like, I only need to do this once. I'm never going to have to do it again. I got it working, and away I go.
right. Well, and they had pictures, right? I mean, that was the step one. I'm like, what do you have? Can you send me everything you have? And then I will ask a bunch of questions. And they said, well, we have all these things. I don't know how up to date they are. It's a lot of that a lot of times, right? And so they just want somebody with a fresh set of eyes to look at it, walk through it, tell me what you see, what are some things we could do to solve it. And they listed a few major concerns they had at the onset of the assessment. And so I made sure to focus on those things and try to have some, options for them.
But sometimes
Oh, go ahead.
sometimes you cut the end off a roast to fit in the pan and you don't know why, right? Like, there's a lot of things, I don't know, the story goes where, why did we cut the ends off the roast for the holiday roast, right? And, I don't know, ask your mom. Grandma always did it that way. Go ask grandma. And eventually it comes back, well, we never had a very big pan back in the day, so we always had to cut it in two to fit in the pan. And, that problem hadn't existed for 50, 100 years, and
then pan-sized technology took off.
Exactly. But some of those things you don't realize you're doing.
So the cost thing, I know that the cloud services, the costs, you've got throughput and compute and and storage and all of these factors. Every time I've looked at it, I get kind of queasy and confused, and it's daunting because I don't have a lot of confidence that I'm not going to be surprised with a huge bill if I go down a certain path. So just having somebody that knows and has the experience to say, yeah, this will save you money. This is cheaper. This is how this works. Even being able to answer questions about what all that means, what all the costs that something, because there's all these different pieces of it. What that means together, what it's going to cost, how to see it, how to think about it. Huge value there.
I think that, the more and more customers go through this review, they're going to realize the cost savings that they're going to get just from the simple report, if just from the base layer, well architected, not even doing a deep dive into the rest of their architecture. I think they're going to see some good ROI. And I mean, Chad, do you have anything else to add on, cost savings or anything that you've been seeing by doing the reports?
I mean, well, as far as cost savings go, there's kind of a few main areas that we look at, and we almost always find stuff. I mean, it would be hard for me to imagine an assessment where we didn't. First of all, if they're having us do an assessment, they probably have concerns about whether they're doing it right or not, right? I mean, that's one of the main things. Yeah, I mean, are you looking for specifics on what do we find or where do we look?
Let's do this. Let's make it worthwhile for whatever engineer, architect, or tech person is listening right now, what's one thing that somebody could go look at right now? Just a sneak peek,
Yep.
check
So
this
number
thing
one
out.
thing to look at from cost perspective is, are you using savings plans for your compute? Because that's up to like a 72% savings over on-demand cost. And a lot of times when people are brand new to the cloud, their DevOps resources are just out there learning, right? And so they're in the console and they're spinning up VMs or whatever they're doing, and that's on-demand cost. That's kind of the default way it works. You pay for what you use. Which is awesome if it's not on all the time. But they'll spin up a VM and they just leave it run. Well, if you have an application where you need the hardware running all the time, you can just buy a cost savings, and all it is a commitment to leave it on for whatever term. You can do a 1 year or a 3 year term. And if you pay all up front and do 3 years, that's the largest cost savings. You can also, pay partial up front or whatever, but you'll get that like 70% savings if you just do a 3 year up front. And a lot of these like business-based web apps that we have running in, containers or on VMs, they're on all the time. Right. So there's really no reason to not do that. That's the number one thing that I would look at. Another one that can be a pretty big savings is if you've got lower environments that don't need to be on all the time because you're not global. Maybe you're all based in the US. Just schedule it to turn off at night. Cut your cost by 50%.
So we just saved, there's somebody listening and they're going to go do this. We just saved their company like $500,000. And since I asked you to kind of show us a little bit behind the curtain, you can send my cut to the following address.
So there's a bunch of things like that, right, that are usually fairly easy to implement and can make a huge impact right away. So
Yeah.
I think 10% is fair.
Well, and honestly, if you're not thinking about it, or if you're a developer, you don't really necessarily think about cost of things anymore. You don't have to put in a requisition for 2 new servers to be running on this this back room or whatever because it's not on-prem. Right. You just spin something up, so it's not as in front of you necessarily, or in front of your team, and just having somebody look at that with an eye towards cost, I think makes a great amount of sense.
For sure. Yeah, if I'm writing code and I'm on a dev team, I'm thinking about how to make things work, right? I'm not thinking about, well, we have 6 environments and what size hardware should we use for those environments based on, some testing that we've done and all that stuff. It's just, I just need a place to deploy it in dev to verify that it works.
So this would really kind of be part of could be part of a QA kind of initiative where that you go in that pre-production environment before launch, kind of do that review or that well-architected review and just nail some things down, tighten things up. That to me, that would be hugely valuable so that, our people didn't have to think about that stuff. Or worry about it because we're going to do this toward the end. At what point should they bring someone in to do the well-architected review if they're developing something new that they're going to put into production?
Yeah, ideally it's in that pre-production stage, right? Where you've got software that's running and you're pushing it up through environments, but you're not quite to prod yet, because that'll help you follow some of those best practices if you don't wait until you're in prod. I mean, a lot of times that's not realistic. Like I said, if you've got it in prod, you probably should do one of these. But ideally you do it before that, because then you can do, like you said, you set up some sort of, load testing and things like this based on expected usage to help right size those environments. Because that also saves cost, right? And just to, kind of estimate how your scaling should work and things like that. Ideally, you're not just doing that in prod, because if you got it wrong and you're in prod, well, then you can experience downtime and things like that. So, or crazy cost, or whatever the bad repercussion is of not doing it before prod.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I think we've covered quite a bit of what the well-architected is. But, just to kind of put maybe a bow on it for today, it's, we're going to come in, assess your workloads, hopefully give you we will give you a nicely formatted report to track your changes and see where we can make improvements for you. And we can apply for some consulting dollars through AWS to get some credits and hopefully show you where your gaps are and help you align to better goals and and hopefully divine nice roadmap for you at the end of it.
Chad, parting thoughts?
Do a well-architected review if you haven't done one.
It's never too late.
Now, I don't know. I think it adds a ton of value. I really do. I think it's something, there's no real reason to not do it, right? I mean, it's not a huge cost. It's probably going to save you more money than it costs for the 4 hours or whatever it is we put into just walking through the questions with the customer. And it kind of gives them this level of confidence that they're on the right track, I think. I think that's kind of nice. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
I would like to revisit this in a year, and we'll see how well architected we've done and how far we've come. Because you're going to be doing a lot of them over the next year, and you'll really see where the easy value is and come to it. So
Yeah,
and then, great idea to revisit this.
Yeah, and it's going to get better and better as you do more and more of these. Just hey, you're going to learn things as you go through this, because you never know everything about a platform like AWS. So I think, but it's the level of training and experience and all those requirements that they've put together right out of the gate. It's rock solid going and doing these things. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it helps a ton, right? For them to provide this framework for us, it's like a big outline of, hey, did you look at all of these things? So we know we're not missing anything from the list of things to look at. So that helps a lot. And then we kind of have the knowledge of the platform to ask the questions and understand what the best practice would be if we're not doing it, that kind of thing. That helps a lot.
Yeah. And think of this as just providing a good foundation for your house. I mean, that's really where I the thing that comes to my mind, just to try to really break it down into simplistic terms, is you got a good foundation, your workloads are just going to be that much better.
And you make sure
awesome.
all the things in place.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chad, for showing up again, and Ben. I think this has been a lot of fantastic information.
Yeah, no problem.
Because I didn't know anything about it, and now I know everything about it.
Now you're an expert.
Yeah, I'm gonna go do my own. No, you can't. All right. I think on that note, we should probably say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye,
See you, everybody.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Do well architected.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.